All right, welcome everybody. My name is Robbie Cluett, VP of Customer Success for Syncon Supply Chain. I want to welcome you to the second installment of our Warehouse Performance Excellence series. This is something that we have been doing in collaboration with CSMP Roundtable in Toronto. If you're watching this for the first time through the Syncon Supply Chain LinkedIn page, do keep in mind that we do host these discussions eventually through our YouTube channel. Just an easier way for you all to see the recordings if you do miss the live session. So be sure to head on over there and subscribe so you're notified when this recording is available. You'll also find a lot of great content just like this over there as well. So please do head over there after this. Without further ado, I am glad to be joined here today by Mark Hoffstetter, a seasoned supply chain leader, currently serving as a Senior Director of Operational Excellence with Global Industrial Company. Global Industrial is a leading supplier of industrial equipment, supplies, and tools. I believe with 2 distribution centers located up here in Canada, where I am, and I believe 5 more relatively large ones in the United States. And I think coming off a great Q3, right, Mark?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I did see that on LinkedIn right before we jumped on here. So congratulations on that. I'm sure the OpEx team has had a lot to do with that. Now, I was also reading a press release earlier today as well, and I read that Global Industrial offers more than 1 million industrial and MRO products. Is that right?
It is true. It's quite a selection, hundreds of thousands.
Wow. Yeah, that's truly a next level commitment to selection for your customers. But I'm sure it doesn't come without its challenges at the warehousing distribution level. You know, I'm in that game as well, and I know that the more items you have, the more customers you have, the more complexity and the more difficulties can arise from that. And that's really why we're here today. You know, that's why I reached out, Mark, to you before we got on here, and you graciously accepted our offer to come on and do this discussion. Is, we do want to reach out to those who are involved in larger distribution networks. I know you spend most of your time within the 4 walls of the warehouse, which is kind of where we're going to base this discussion on today. But usually, ever since COVID, I think, OpEx had its time obviously before COVID, but I think after COVID, that lean growth, really cutting down on unnecessary expenditure and unnecessary waste really became, the marquee of a lot of companies, especially public companies, obviously with the numbers coming in every quarter. The lean growth and profitable growth is really the name of the game. And that's sort of where we kind of wanted to base. I'm in that business as well. I'm the optimization business. That's our main business is cutting down on waste. And that's sort of where this series, obviously with my board position with CSCMP, that's sort of where this came about. And I appreciate Mark for taking the time to discuss that with us today. Because I know behind every distribution network, there's usually an OpEx team that's ensuring things are running smoothly and efficiently. So I guess, Mark, what we can start with, aside from just telling you I appreciate for you coming on here today, is I did give you a bit of an intro, but if you want to take a minute or so and elaborate on your experience and a little bit about what your role entails there at Global Industrial.
Yeah, thanks. Again, thanks, Robbie, for having me on. Happy to share some expertise and chat with you for a little while. So my background goes back to industrial engineering. I spent 5 years in manufacturing and about the last 20 in different companies in supply chain, distribution, and warehousing. So it's been an exciting ride, exciting journey here at Global Industrial as the Senior Director of Operational Excellence. I have oversight of our process team, which handles quality initiatives, our system improvements, process, and then our engineering team, providing labor efficiencies, productivity reporting, automation, or software solutions. And then I've had connections with our learning and development team to help be the change agents of this end-to-end process improvement that we have here at Global. So it's been an exciting 5 years on our journey here.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, that's a lot of responsibility, I'm sure, especially with all those products and obviously with 7 sites. You're based out of Atlanta, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I know you guys have a site in Toronto. I think that's kind of how we connected a few years ago. I think I was out in Toronto and I ended up passing by one of your sites.
Right.
And I reached out to you, and I guess all these years later, we finally ended up connecting with discussion. So it's funny how things work.
Yeah.
Now, first things first, Mark, I want to ask you how you would describe operational excellence, just to sort of level set on how you would describe it, and what its primary role has been within global industrial or really high in performance, high performing distribution network. How would you sort of define that in terms of your role there?
Sure. I think like the word I used earlier is it's a journey, right? We all know it's literally continuous improvement. And that's literally what it is. You have to continue to improve. You have to build on other projects. You have to continue your momentum. And it's continuing how you just keep creating those foundational steps, building and building, and then creating a culture where those improvements become ingrained. And then you have the process discipline to sustain what you've already done while you have the team work on new initiatives. So commitment to improvement and process discipline is how I'd sum it up.
Perfect. And I also noticed that you moved from more of an industrial engineering background. Can you share a sort of pivotal moment in your career that helped you reshape how you think about operational excellence? Like, did that background really kind of push you into it? Because I don't have an industrial engineering background, but I do work with those who do, and I know that it's when it comes to Six Sigma, when it comes to these types of things, like it's sort of ingrained into that thinking already. Is that sort of how you became involved in it, or sort of what directed you more into that path?
Sure. It's a great question. And I mentor a lot of college students, and I get the same question, like, what is your career trajectory? How did you get there? So in a nutshell, with an engineering degree and background, you have a very technical acumen and experience. And at some point, people in their career might decide, do I want to continue on the technical track, or do I want to become more a leader of people? And I had opportunities throughout my career to toggle between both, to go into operations, back to engineering, into operations, back. And then ultimately, I think the role I'm in is, personally satisfying because it's a culmination of both. It's engineering and process background, but I have the opportunity to lead an amazing team of people who go and execute our vision and strategy.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes sense. And when it comes to data, the way that I've split these questions up is to go kind of through them in sections and themes and stuff like that. So the first question I have is on the when it comes to data and decision making. And I know a lot of what you do there at OpEx or at OpEx in general. I most of my day is working with OpEx teams when it comes to implementing our optimization system. So I do deal with a lot of people in your position. I know how important data is. Now, if you had to rebuild, it might be a hard question, but if you had to rebuild your dashboards from scratch tomorrow, what 3 signals would you rebuild first, and why those?
Well, I think it just goes back to, what do your eyes tell you? So if you lose visibility to dashboards and data and reporting, just go see. That's a common theme in engineering, is the Gemba walk. Just go see, observe. So the 3 areas, Robbie, that I would say, one is balanced flow. What are your eyes telling you? Do you see product movement? Is it balanced? Is there bottlenecks? Is there WIP? Where is the WIP? Is it in the right place? Too much, too little? So what's the balanced flow throughout the warehouse? Secondly, I would look at people, employee utilization. Do they feel overworked? Are they overwhelmed? Are they underutilized? So again, what's the balance of how you utilize your employees as a resource? And then lastly, you have to measure something. And in distribution centers, we get boxes or pallets out the door. So however, you would have to restructure or remeasure your throughput, right? If that's trucks loaded, pallets loaded, cartons, orders fulfilled, batches completed, whatever that metric is, to show some type of throughput. So that's how I would say it: flow, people, and then how do you measure your throughput?
Right. And I guess that brings me back to what you said, is like, when you're coaching people that want to get in there, it's I'm sure you would say data is important, but you'd still have to rely on the eye test of being able to recognize, things in the absence of data, right?
Right.
Now, when it comes to culture and change management, and I know that's, again, I reference data as something that I work with every day. Culture and change management would be the next one that I would touch on. And that's sort of been a lot of my job in customer success, is to figure out, how to best support people from the operation and in the OpEx world on, navigating change. So I think we both know that properly navigating change is pretty critical. when it comes to introducing new practices, processes, systems, and even equipment. And I know this from, a system implementation standpoint, like I said, working with OpEx teams. But from your perspective, how does change management, or how much does change management play into your role, and what primary challenges typically come with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think process implementation, the last step is change management of it.
Mhm.
You can have an idea, you develop it, you test it, you roll it out, but that rollout is a change to someone else. And that's how you have to manage through the change so that you can ensure the sustainment. I think a common challenge with change management or implementation is taking that idea from testing through development and then flipping it into production. You do all the work, you do the validation, the system UAT, you document the SOPs, the physical layout, you do the training with the associates and leaders, and then maybe the adoption isn't as quick as you like, and the solution isn't absorbed. So it's what I call thinking about the peripherals, right? You have an idea, but what are all the ancillary issues or considerations you have to consider? What are impacts to other metrics, maybe negatively? What other behaviors might result of this process change? So I think you try to get ahead of that. You communicate the why, provide screenshots or a visual of the future state and the expected results, and then just outline your readiness tasks and do the best you can for the change management.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, is always going to be people that are going to be against certain change, and for the most part, it just, for me, it's like communication, telling them why you're doing it, communicating the benefits, and of course, when you get into that, especially for our system, it's how fast can we communicate value, because the faster you can, get to that first point of value, the easier it is for them to understand the why behind it. Which kind of goes into my next, it's a good segue to my next question. Now, as we both know, there's no shortage of warehouse tech promising transformation. What's been your litmus test for knowing when a tool is truly adding value versus just adding complexity? And it could be a system, it could be really, any kinds of tool that's out there right now. Obviously, with AI, with with what's going on out there in the world, robotics, there's tons of things you can implement, but we know that there's promised value and then there's actual value. What's been your experience with that?
Yeah, so this kind of goes along with like how long is a pilot, right? So it's a good question, and I would ask, is the pilot or is your solution serving its purpose? Maybe there was an expected benefit. Maybe there was a very particular metric that was supposed to be influenced, return on investment. I think it's a good question and a hard question, because suddenly you don't just one day say, oh, the pilot is complete. It's all you got to look at it and ask, has sufficient time elapsed? Have you had enough repetitions or representative sample of occurrences that you can make an informed decision on? And then, is the pilot ready to stand on its own, right? Can it now seamlessly transition into the operation you're implementing it and become the new current state?
Yeah, I think especially with ours, and speaking with SaaS, obviously when you're working with a SaaS provider, you're working with a partner. And I think that's, for a lot of companies, they are looking for that partner, that vendor that's going to come in as a partner and help them reach their goals, as opposed to, I'm sure in your history, or in the experience that you've had, you've purchased software and then you've basically been left up to, okay, let's make this work. And oftentimes that's all you have to do because you've already paid up front for it. So I think that's sort of where the industry is going, at least from my perspective, is a lot of companies are leaning on their partners to help them, get them through that. So a lot of my partnerships, a lot of the companies that we work with, that's why we're so involved in these OpEx teams, because they are leaning on us for our end of the work, which is to support, them on getting the software, getting the service or the system in place. And I think that's sort of been my experience over the last, say 10 years in my role, working with people like that. Now, talking about peak season, as we're currently speaking, we're heading into Thanksgiving and Black Friday. So hopefully you get the next couple of days off down there. But it's also a very important busy time for a lot of distributors. Now, I know Global Industrial doesn't operate on the typical consumer calendar, so you're not going to see the, your typical busy time around this time of the year. But what's your playbook when it comes to adjusting to the peaks and lulls throughout the year? Because I think every company has them. It's just depending on where they fall.
Exactly. And I was going to lead off and say every business experiences some type of peak or standard flow and ebb and flow within their year. As you said, for example, a B2C e-commerce retailer, they're going to experience in the coming days the usual Black Friday through Christmas peak. So it makes sense for them to make adjustments to the labor force, streamlining onboarding, modifying waves, maximizing the clock with overtime or additional shifts. And then on the other hand, you may have a B2B that has a different peak model because it is dealing with other businesses as the customer. Mm-hmm. So when you're dealing with another business as a customer, they too could be on vacation for Thanksgiving and these last 5-6 weeks of the calendar year. Mm-hmm. But then again, you have business customers that are working within an annual budget. Mm-hmm. So they ramp up orders because they have money in their budget they're expected to spend and get purchases in before the end of the year. So it's a unique situation. Every business is different. So we look at it, whether it's the full year or even, throughout the day. And that's an important part of engineering and OpEx is what does your order flow look like during the day? What's your bell curve or what's the incoming flow? So we look at it on a daily basis. And then, of course, throughout the year, any of the ebbs and flows that happen.
Yeah, and I think reacting to those, I always come back to a project that we did. This is it actually was during COVID. It was like 2021. I think it was a little while ago, and it was a consumer goods company, and they had it was a pretty unique situation because over the holidays, their business picked up, I think, 10x. So if you can imagine their e-commerce, and through COVID, all their retail customers went into e-commerce. So not only did it pick up 10x, it actually probably doubled that even further. So they were dealing with a situation where their entire business was around the holidays. So they basically had to operate one way for 49 weeks, 48 weeks. And then for the last 3 weeks of the year, they were, basically that was their entire business to ensure that the customers were able to get their goods overnight for Christmas. So you can imagine the challenges where you'd have to scale your operation up to fit a 10x growth for one season. So I think that's one end of the spectrum, and the other end is just like you said, is adjusting to the ebbs and flows throughout the year and making sure that you're not scaling up too much where you're spending extra money, but you can still manage the ups and downs.
Right.
Now, in terms of introducing projects, tech, and executing change, and you might be biased on this one, but should OpEx own a budget and a veto? Or be mostly involved in influence and coaching? Where do you see OpEx fitting when it comes to introducing and executing some of these things?
Yes, I am biased. Yes, I think so. To answer your question, OpEx should own a budget or be a major player in those discussions. Mm-hmm. Robbie, I'm going to reference some notes here, but I was reading the recent logistics management survey on warehouse operation trends. One of the findings was that the average CapEx of the respondents was somewhere $2.16 million. So the average CapEx over $2 million. I'm assuming most of that was already pre-planned. There was a calculated ROI in advance and expectations of the expenditure. However, I believe there should be some money earmarked and set aside, as I like to say, for R&D, whether it's OpEx in your organization or engineering. As I say, the OpEx engineering laboratory. So where can we get some dollars allocated for things we don't yet know is coming or things that are out there? Mm-hmm. And in that case, it could be something for software. Maybe you purchase a software or a pilot. Maybe it's equipment rental and you have some dollars for that. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's consulting dollars if you just don't have the internal expertise. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think having some dollars to generate more savings, I think is an important part of the CapEx project. Your OpEx teams should have a voice in that. And again, as best as they can, create the ROI, have those project charters ready to go when the CapEx planning comes around. but then also it helps just, for new technology. We all go to these trade shows and networking and things. So you just don't know what's out there until you see what's out there. And in that case, you may need some additional funds when the opportunity arises.
Yeah, and I agree. And I'd be biased on that too. Just because we work with so many great OpEx teams that, when you're working sometimes with operators, you're working with executives, sometimes they don't, I guess they have this, how do I word this properly? It's not like they don't have the skills to recognize these types of things, just that they don't, the oversight is usually not there because that's not their job. Like if we go to, say, inventory control, I'm in the slotting business. We have a slotting optimization system, and we work a lot in that business, whether it's, setting up daily slotting, whether it's, setting up optimal layouts, even, new DCs. When we're dealing with, say, IC, oftentimes they don't really report, or oftentimes the slotters don't really, they report an IC and they don't really get judged, or they don't get, they're not accountable for any of the changes or any increase in productivity when it comes to slotting. So there's I guess a void of oversight sometimes in these things. And I use slotting as an example because that's what I know. But I know that, if you don't look at it, if you don't spend the time looking at it, if you don't have that skill set or even the time to do it, then, you're not going to really pay much attention to it. Whereas if it's an OpEx team that goes in that understands, say a slotting system, or understands analytics, or understands certain things that you're doing, you should have the ability to execute on it because you're the ones that are going to be accountable for it, right? If you're there to recognize shortfalls and you're going to, patch it up, you're going to be, putting best practices in place, you should have the budget to carry those things out, right? And the accountability to make sure that they go right.
Yep.
At least in my opinion, I agree with you 100% on that one. And I guess that would go into the next one, Mark, is what's the best way that you found to influence change at the site level? And also, how do you achieve buy-in for the same initiatives on the executive level? Because I think for the most part, you're sort of, you're talking to the operational team, and you're also trying to get this buy-in from, say, your VPs at the regional level. So how would you sort of balance those out?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of more psychology to this than just engineering and math. The math will tell the story, the return on investment, what you have to spend up front, your ongoing costs, what's your ongoing savings. And I think that's a very clear financial model. But then comes the psychology part. So you have to know your audience, know what drives them to succeed. Meaning, is it prestige? Is it metrics? Is it competitiveness? Just getting their job easier, getting their job done easier. So knowing what, again, for that individual or that audience base, how do you speak to them? How do you speak their language, and then the metrics and things that are important to them? And then you translate the benefit of your initiative to that language and to that metric. So I don't think it's a peanut butter spread and a simple presentation. Robbie, you should do this, and here's the math behind it. But you really have to understand the individual and who you're talking to, whether, again, it's the C-suite level, your immediate manager, the population of the associates that you're going to implement the change to, and just knowing what is it going to take to convince them.
Now, I guess a good segue to that, Mark, is I know throughout your career, I'm sure you have a ton of success stories. Can you walk us through, maybe one transformation you're particularly proud about, potentially starting with, the baseline, kind of how you recognize the opportunity, what the intervention looked like, and maybe some of the results at the 90-day and 12-month mark?
Sure. I will use one without bias, Robbie, but one near and dear to your heart, and that is slotting. The gains that you can get without really impacting an associate's actual work and their elemental tasks, just by doing some slotting initiatives in your warehouse. And this could be, in a pick module where they're on foot, simply moving the fast movers to the golden zone closest to the exit conveyor, those types of things where they're reaching and keeping it in the golden zone of reach and weight. Or it could be if you have hundreds of racks and aisles in your DC, how do you reduce that travel, right? You can only get so fast with picking and the actual transaction, the elemental work. So travel, especially in larger distribution centers, is a big issue. So how do you minimize that? So one specific example from my past is simply ground level slotting. Pull some data, you look at which level most of the time your order fulfillers, your order pickers are going, and how do you get that, those fast moving velocity SKUs, how do you get those down to the ground level? We did a study once, and very simply, 3 seconds every time the lift goes up another level in your warehouse. So imagine 3 seconds for every level up, 3 seconds every level down. And the pickers themselves, they could tell you, why am I always going to the 4th level to get this item every couple hours or every few minutes, depending on your DC's velocity? And it's something as simple as that, getting the fast movers down to the ground. So, in my past, we've seen where it was almost an even split, and then you get down to 2/3, 70% of your order picks from the ground level. Now imagine you're on a forklift, you turn the corner, and instead of having an even chance of picking from any level, you're picking from the ground level, 2/3 or more of the time. Multiply that over those 3 seconds and all the picks in your warehouse, and you can have a pretty significant savings. A lot of that, again, you can just do from a one-time data pull and looking at your data and your order profile. But of course, you need to know your business. Is there seasonality? Is there SKU affinity? Anything about the order profiles? I know you're very familiar with this, with the slotting information, and you can only get so far with data. And then whether it's your WMS or another software solution, that's when you can really take it to the next level, looking at SKU affinities, order profiles. But really, slotting, I think, is really basic but fundamental process improvement in the DCs. And as I said, and we've been talking about, how do you get people to buy in and adopt? And they don't need to. Their pick path is different and it's better. And there's nothing really different what they do with their RF scanner or their picking device. They're just driving to a location, and instead they're driving there without the vertical travel or without the additional horizontal travel, if you're able to pull those fast movers maybe closer to your packing stations. So slotting, again, whether it's getting the fast movers down to the ground or getting everything closer to the outbound docks, I think is huge. If you can do A, B, and C velocity profile in your DC, you can get some significant gains. Now, as far as 90 days or 12 months, it is a process. And depending on how many SKUs you're moving around, it is kind of like that sliding puzzle. You have to empty a space, move something over, move something there. So it's not an overnight success, and you do need some resources dedicated to it, to do it initially and then to sustain it. But I think the picking productivity you get is well worth that ROI and that investment to have those associates keeping up with the slotting. So you may not see it in 90 days. You may for your fastest movers, but over the course of the year, that's where you're really going to get transformational impact.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I know you think that I know that I would have a bias on this too, which I certainly do, because I see the impact on it, not just because it's a business that I do, but I do see the impact on it. I talk to a lot of teams that exercise these projects, and they do see the benefit of it. So like I do have a firsthand knowledge of what exactly what you're talking to. I've walked through sites that have these order selectors that go up and down. Almost every pick, it's up and down, up and down, up and down. Sometimes if the orders aren't fast enough, then it's negligible. But sometimes what you're saying is like, if it's faster moving items and you're constantly going up and down, like these are things that, are not really going to make the feedback loop. A lot of the times, sometimes you do need that third, that additional set of eyes to sort of walk through and see this happening. And then you can see obviously the data is going to prove your point. But actually, to throw an example of what I've seen in my history, and we do a lot of business in grocery. We do business in every industry, but grocery, as you can imagine, especially this time of year, they're calling us to ensure that they're fully optimized and year round. But one of the things that really resonated with me, because a lot of people, and to your point, you said that slotting is not necessarily disruptive. Like there's tons of things you can do that people are just not going to notice. There are process changes that 1 hour spent on a computer as an analyst is going to affect potentially thousands of hours on the floor, when it comes to order selectors and forklift hours and stuff like that. And one of the things that I would say, and I just finished looking at this right before we got on the call, is we have a couple of clients that are looking at optimizing their inbound pallets. Usually when people think about slotting, it's on the outbound side. but there's a report that we generated for them that looks at them basically taking levels off their pallets when the pallets come in. And it's not to fit the pallet into the rack. It's just because the warehouse pallet high is set at a certain number that there's nobody questioning why it's there. Like, why are we taking 2 levels off when we can just leave those levels on and have a runoff pallet right into the rack? It's not often you're going to get there, but surprisingly enough, we have, every single day there seems to be 10 or 12 examples of where they're saying, well, we're not actually necessarily telling you to move the item. We're just telling you to stop taking the levels off. And it's like, well, we didn't notice that because we weren't even questioning it. But those are types of things that you don't see, right? That's the iceberg that a lot of operators are not able to see underneath, what's going on when you don't have the data or the time or the specificity of your role to really get in there and start looking at those types of things.
That's a good point. I mean, I mentioned it. It's about slotting and the outbound picks, but to your point, put away is a key aspect. Your item classification, it all starts up front. So even if you do a maintenance or a one-time slotting optimization, it's like the incoming flow is still there. So you got to get it right during the setup. Otherwise, you're just going to be doing more rework to move things around the second time. And, the software, like I said, there's software out there as you're familiar with. You can have heat maps, SKU profiles, order profiles, similarities in there. It helps you group like items or product families. Are 2 items always ordered together? Do you components or kits in your SKU mix? So there's a lot of things out there you can do. But I think first level slotting is the key. And then, like you said, put away is another aspect you need to look at for sure.
Now, Mark, as far as pitfalls to avoid, I want to sort of look at the other side of things. Now, any common mistakes that you think that a lot of OpEx teams make, or shedding any light on any mistakes that you've made in your career, and how you can steer clear of them? Obviously, there's things that come up and you learn things over the years. What would you think is one of the main ones more recently that, either you've made yourself or that you see teams making a lot that you would coach them to steer clear of?
Yeah, I think a common issue or challenge is that a continuous improvement team, whether it's engineering or your IT team, OpEx, whoever, we can be so familiar with an initiative, right? Like I said earlier, we develop the idea, we write the work instructions, we do the user acceptance testing, we know the screenshots, the screen flow, we try to document and anticipate all the exceptions. It becomes so familiar to us. And I think a common pitfall is we may forget that our audience or the recipients don't have that luxury of the amount of time or intense knowledge, the intimacy of the knowledge that you have. So I think it's important to realize that when you're introducing a change, you're handing it over to someone who's seeing it for the first time. And as much as you've created your work instructions, your PowerPoints, your training, whether that's a classroom training, hands-on, written document, whatever, people still learn differently. And just like a habit change, this process change is going to take some repetition and time. So I think one of the common pitfalls is that CI teams were so familiar with the change, in your world, the software and everything, but for someone else to see it on the screen or on their RF scanner, or their pack stations just set up differently, there's a level of just the human habit change that has to occur with some repetition. So I think that's the challenge, is like, you think, well, we're going to roll this out on, the first week, the Monday of this month, but then realize, well, maybe you have 3 shifts or more. And people learn differently. Maybe they're more visual. Maybe they're classroom based. Maybe they need to be shown, one-on-one. So I think that the challenge is that we've written everything, we're going to hand it over, everyone's just going to absorb it, read it, and do it right on day one. And again, I think it just gets back to the psychology and humanity of work. You have to be your audience and realize that you have to be a change agent and a trainer and walk them through it, because they didn't have the prior weeks or months that you just spent developing and preparing for this rollout. They get it on day one and they're expected to execute. So how do you quickly get them up to speed in a way that they're comfortable with and successful with?
Yeah, and that's a really good point too. And I like the psychology aspect of it as well. When we're designing processes internally, we always have to think, I know it as one, I see the numbers and I see, the benefits of some of these things, but the people that are using it, say the users of a software, they're not necessarily seeing it the same way, so you got to think of like what's in it for them first of all, and then how is it affecting them. Are we adding time to their day? Are we adding complexity to their day? Are we adding something that they just don't want to do because they're not going to get any value out of it, or they're not going to get rewarded for it. Everybody has their own perspective, right? Whether it's a new software, a new process, or somebody's been in the job for 30 years, to your point. They see it differently.
Yeah, it's not as simple as, well, Robbie, I just showed you the PowerPoint. You signed the training document. You understand it, right? Go do it. No, there may be some one-on-one interaction, and again, it's got to build that habit change and that knowledge, that muscle memory, those repetitions to really make them successful.
That's like true leadership as well, right? Is to figure out, get in the boots of somebody, show that empathy, something that AI can't do. You got to actually do the human aspect of it to really get that change affected.
Yep.
So before we bring the discussion to a close, and I can't believe we've already been on here for 40 minutes. I think time flies when you're having fun, right? Before we bring the discussion to a close and let you get back to your day, I have 4 quick fire questions for you. Essentially, these are just the first thing that comes to your mind, 1 or 2 word answers, but you can answer them however you like. The first one is, what's the toughest part of your job?
Well, again, I think change management. We can spend a lot of time on data and analysis and testing and preparation, especially a CI team. Like I said earlier, we're in the laboratory of developing ideas and process improvement. And then it's the handoff. How do you make sure something gets implemented? And the change management, how does it get absorbed and make sure that it's sustained after you implement it and walk away?
Right. Great answer. What's the first thing you look at when you walk a new facility?
Interaction.
Facility for the first time.
Yeah, interactions. And again, maybe this is me thinking more of the psychology of work, but what are the interactions among the people in that facility? Like, whether it's manufacturing or distribution, wherever, where are the leaders? How are they interacting? Are they busy with data? Are they engaging associates? Are they coaching associates and training? Are the associates interacting with each other? As a visitor, are associates engaging and welcoming to you? So I think, again, just what's the humanity, what's the human interaction, peer-to-peer, manager and direct reports, and then even for visitors. I think it says a lot about the work culture.
Yeah, I would completely, as an avid visitor to sites, I would certainly agree with you. If you could only improve 1 metric this quarter, which one would it be?
I would say converting data to action, right? So again, many of us in OpEx or engineers or systems folks, we have a lot of data, a lot of reports. What is it telling us? And then what can you do with it? So much like if anyone's heard it in continuous improvement, the 5 whys, you keep asking why to get to the root cause. You ask 5 times. I like to say then what? Okay, we do this, we get the data. Then what? Okay, we have the data. Then what? So how do you continue to take data and then take action upon that to, again, continuously improve, instead of just saying, we've got an email report, it gets sent out, everyone should be good. They see the data, they should act on it. But how do you actually make sure that actions are happening based off of the data?
Right. That's good. That's a really good answer.
Thanks.
Now, the best way, and I think you alluded to this once or twice, but in terms of the quick fire sort of answers, what's the best way to win over a frontline team when rolling out change?
I say be physically present, be alongside. So again, I go back to this example of, you're kind of in a laboratory or your team's working behind the scenes, you're doing all this development. But when you actually implement something, again, as best as you can, get out of the virtual state and get into the physical alongside those that you're working with. So check in with the supervisors, the leaders in the building. interact with them. Go talk to the associates. We all know how these associates are doing these processes all day long. They're very familiar with it. Go be there with them so you don't just seem like some outside force coming in and doing a handoff. I think that's how you win folks over is, again, you be physically present. You show that with your attentiveness and your presence that you are there to help them and support them.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I resonate with that answer as well. It's very well put. All right, with that, I do want to thank all of you for watching or listening, whether it's the live version or whether you're catching this at a later time. And Mark, I do appreciate your time and your insight and sharing those insights with us and to our listeners today. I know you said you were involved a lot in coaching, and it does show through in a lot of your answers. So I hope everybody was able to get a lot from this discussion. That's really why we're doing them. Now I'll give you the floor, Mark, for any final thoughts you have for listeners out there. Maybe something that you would tell people that you're coaching, whether they're a seasoned OpEx leader like yourself, or just kind of getting into the subject matter. I'll give you the floor for anything you want to share with those people.
Thanks, Robbie. Again, thanks everyone, and happy to be here today. So I would close with this. A recent mentor, we were talking about change management. I was the mentee. I was talking to my mentor. We were talking about change management, and he explained that it requires three things in the planning: the why, the how, and the result. Why are you doing this? How are you going to accomplish it? And then what's the expected result? And we touched on a lot of these in today's discussion. And his point was, if any of those components are lacking, the why, the how, the result, if you don't have that communicated and shared and aligned, if any of those components are missing, your output is going to be a different result than what you expected. Mm-hmm. So you always have to make sure, again, you're covering all the components, talking to your audience, as we said earlier, know your audience, engage with them, meet them at their metric. What's the behavior change you have to address? And make sure you're addressing the why, the how, and the result. Otherwise, there's going to be some aspect of anxiety, confusion, non-compliance, whatever negative behavior that you want to put in there. But if you don't kind of have the whole picture and that buy-in, the result's going to be different than you expected. So a lot of pre-planning up front, over communication and alignment with the audience, I think are some key aspects.
Perfect. Well, that's great advice, and I do like how much you brought in psychology, because the more you're into this business, whether side you're on, when you're affecting change, trying to get things to work, trying new things, there's a very human aspect that I think a lot of people do miss out on, and so I think that you've really highlighted that in this discussion. I think it speaks well to operational excellence as a whole, and to how you guys are operating there as an organization. So I do appreciate that insight, Mark, and for being with us here today.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And I hope you enjoyed the discussion. And again, please follow us on LinkedIn, on YouTube. We have a lot of this great content coming up. And this is a series. I don't know when the next one's going to be, but we do have more great people just like Mark coming on. So I appreciate you following along, and hope you had a great time today.